Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet. My co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How are you this week?
Things are going pretty well. It's another week. We're getting closer to the end of the regular season in the CanPL. I guess it's a little anticlimactic from a Cavalry standpoint in regards to where they're going to end up in the standings, but should still be an interesting weekend, I think, overall.
Well, there's still a lot of there's other teams that have playoff spots to play for, and it's nice that for some of them it's really come down to the last week of the regular season. That does keep it interesting, and I'm excited to see who claims that last spot.
And if you are a new listener to our podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
Our podcast focuses on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from Calgary's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level.
And this week, we're going to touch on a lot of topics. We're going to talk about Cavalry. We're going to talk about their last match against Valor and about this upcoming one against Pacific to end the regular season. We'll talk a little bit about the U21 minutes, and we'll do some post-secondary updates. We're also going to do an interview with Adam Huskic. He is a Calgarian that is currently playing pro soccer in Finland. That's going to pretty much cover it. But Scott, you want to get started for today, though?
Yeah, and before we jump into those topics, I did want to mention something Calgary soccer related that's on a more somber note. Earlier this week, we learned that John Fisher had passed away. John was involved with Calgary soccer for a long time as a coach, and he was involved with the likes of Rangers, Southwest United, Chinook, and Foothills over the years, as well as Alberta Soccer and I think Whitecaps Alberta. I personally knew John for quite some time. He was actually my Chinook team's assistant coach around 2011 and 2012. I always enjoyed his coaching and I liked chatting football with him. He was a massive Chelsea fan and always down to banter about the Premier League or other soccer-related topics. But if you played soccer in Calgary, you're probably familiar with Fisher's Soccer Shack, which was the soccer store in Riverbend. It was later rebranded as World of Soccer in 2021, but before that, it was run by the Fisher family for 14 years, from 1999 to 2013. I personally really loved that store. It had a great soccer ambience. There was always a game on the TV when you went there, scarves and jerseys and team photos and posters up on the wall. So, I mean, for me, growing up as a soccer player, heading to Fisher's usually I was there to buy a new pair of boots. It was certainly a ritual of mine. I hated shopping growing up, but shopping for soccer stuff was always an exception to that. And as a kid who loved soccer during a time where that was still a bit unusual or less mainstream, Fisher's always made me feel welcome. So I just wanted to give John a little bit of a tribute this episode and let the Fisher family know that, if they happen to listen to this podcast, they have our condolences, and we Chinook United 94 alumni, we're all thinking of the family in this difficult time.
Yeah, well said, Scott. Definitely pass on our condolences. Let's go and talk a little bit about Cavalry this week. Last week, the Cavs had a match at Spruce Meadows. They played Valor, and they were able to pull off another victory, 2-1 on a rainy Friday night. It didn't really matter too much overall from implications of the standings for either club. But I guess the one thing I wanted to mention is Gareth Smith-Doyle was able to notch his first goal as a pro. What do you think about this match, Scott?
Well, I didn't attend the match, but I did watch it from home. It looked like the conditions were pretty rough. It looked like torrential rain at the start, a very slick pitch. But despite that, the reported attendance was still nearly 4,000. So kudos to fans for flocking to Spruce Meadows despite the adverse conditions. Yeah, like you mentioned, Gareth Smith-Doyle scoring his first goal for Cavalry was definitely the highlight of the match and kind of the headline maker. The match itself was a case of Valor scoring first after a bit of a blunder by Marco Carducci. Very uncharacteristic of him. He just passed the ball right to the Valor forwards, and they kind of marched in and scored to go up 1-0 in the first half. But Cavalry did show a lot of character to come back into the match. Who scored the first goal? I'm actually drawing a blank right now, but it was it Camargo?
Camargo scored. That was a play where I believe Alan Musi had the ball on the wing and he passed it to Camargo, who was in the box, and he just nailed it. It was like, as things have been going for Sergio Camargo lately, it's just, it just all looked very easy and beautiful, really, when it comes right down to it. That's just the way he's playing right now.
Yeah, he's in good form. He scored in their last game too, if I recall, against York. So good for him. And then early into the second half, Gareth Smith-Doyle, really nicely taken goal by him. And I know it's been coming. He's had a couple of chances leading up to this, but they haven't fallen his way. This time, I really want to commend him on this play because every touch leading up to the shot was perfectly placed, and his footsteps were ideal to set himself up for the shot. And I believe it went in off the post. So kudos to him for his first professional goal. I believe he got the match ball after, and he got to be interviewed and talk about his kind of journey up to this point, which is really nice because he is a Calgary kid. He's been coached by Tommy Wheeldon Jr. through the Foothills system for a long time. He was a successful player with the University of Calgary Dinos before this. And it was just a great story to watch it all happen for him.
And one thing I wanted to add in, which I don't really think I've ever seen mentioned before, but at the press conference, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. mentioned that even at the U17 level, Gareth Smith-Doyle wasn't playing Tier 1. He was playing Tier 2 soccer. So he's really a late bloomer to go from being a Tier 2 player at U17 level to now being, like, I think he's 20 right now and scoring his first pro goal. That's quite the ascent.
Yeah, I didn't know that, to be honest. And like I said, I wasn't at the match, but wow, that's to be playing Tier 2 at 17 and then to be professional just a couple of years later. That's a fantastic story. So well done, Gareth. And I'm sure now that he's broken his scoring duck, because he did have a couple of misses earlier this season, I think he could probably find another goal or two.
The final Cavs regular season match of the year is going to be on Saturday afternoon at Spruce Meadows. They're going to play Pacific. Yeah, this one's going to matter to Pacific for sure. I think if I have everything matched up right here, I believe that a Pacific win and a loss by Forge would mean that Pacific would leapfrog them and get into second position.
And I believe under the new playoff format, that would mean Cavalry play Pacific again in the first round of playoffs at home. Is that correct?
Yes. So whoever ends up in second place, whether it's going to be Forge or Pacific, that's who Cavalry is going to play. I believe there is some really crazy scenario where Halifax could actually jump into second place, but many things have to happen. So it's probably not that likely.
Okay. And the playoff format this year it's very different from previous years. Even though Cavalry's first playoff match would be against the second place team, they could hypothetically lose that match and they'd still have a route to the championship final regardless, depending on other matches.
Yes. As I understand it, they will be playing at home next Saturday, October 14th, against one of these teams. And if they win that match, then they get a bye week and then they host the final. And if they lose that match next weekend, then they play the winner of the 3v4 match. So that could be, it could be a multitude of teams at this point, but I'm not sure where that match is held. I'm guessing it could very well be here, but essentially a loss next weekend, they don't get the bye week, they play again. And if they win that, then they would go to the final. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm picturing the roadmap, and it could be Halifax, and it's not 3v4, it's 3v the winner of 4v5. So a very convoluted playoff format, but it does keep it interesting, and it does give a little bit of a reward to Cavalry for finishing first. They get home field advantage, and they do get a second chance, essentially, if they lose that opening match against whether it's Pacific or Forge. We'll find out after Saturday.
Oh, and one more thing to mention about this match. After the match, the commissioner of the league will be there, and they're going to get the presentation for the regular season trophy, the North Star Shield, the repurposed North Star Shield, which was the playoff winning trophy before, but now it's going to be going to the regular season champion. And we'll see that post-match on Saturday.
Yeah, and is it now called the CPL Shield as opposed to the North Star?
Oh, I think you're right. I think that is correct.
And
Yes.
it's shaped like a toonie or something. It looked like a toonie. I think people are joking about that a little bit.
Well, I was under the impression it's exactly the same trophy as it was before. They've just
Oh,
renamed it and repurposed it, but
okay.
I'm not completely sure about that. But the idea is the new playoff trophy is a cup, and I think that's kind of the real goal of what they wanted to get out of this, is that would be a cup, and then they're going to use this as a shield, like kind of like the supporter shield in MLS, I guess, is sort of maybe the parallel.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about U21 minutes. We can finally stop talking about this because mission accomplished. Last week, Cavalry broke their 2,000 minute requirement. They're now at 2,018 minutes for the year, and with one match remaining. And Mel Henry played the full match, all 90 minutes, and Gareth Smith-Doyle, he started and scored, and he was subbed off late in the match. I think it was around the 80th minute or so. But anyway, bottom line is that's taken care of. So a recurring topic and theme that we've had over the last several weeks, it's now done and dusted.
Yeah, happy to kind of put that one behind us. I know we were keeping on it, but yeah, it's nice to kind of put that topic to bed, rather.
Agree. Let's move on to some post-secondary results, and let's start off with the colleges. We'll start on the women's side. And last week we were talking about the big matchup between SAIT and Lethbridge College, and how that was a battle between two top 10 nationally ranked teams. And Lethbridge College pulled it out and got the victory over SAIT 2-0. First loss for SAIT this season. And then the next day, they seemed to get over it quite easily. They beat Old 8-0. And they're ranked 14th nationally.
Yeah, and you had, I think, done a little digging and discovered that the goal scorer for Lethbridge, both goals were scored by Kenley Matashak, who is from Calgary.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting. A good chunk of that Lethbridge roster is actually from Calgary and Airdrie. I think they have 3 players that list Airdrie as their hometown, and I think about 3 or 4 players that list Calgary as their hometown. So,
that's it. I want to check that out because I may recognize the Airdrie players.
Mm-hmm. For the men, SAIT just keeps on rolling. They won 7-0 against Lethbridge and 5-0 versus Olds. Still ranked number 2 nationally, and seem to be not challenged at all on a week-to-week basis.
Not in ACAC, no. I'd really like to see this SAIT team play a U Sports team, because it seems like that would be the only way they get some decent competition this regular season. It'll be interesting to see how SAIT's dominance translates to the playoffs, as well as the national tournament if they make it that far, which I think they very well might. But yeah, I haven't seen them play this year. I actually wasn't too familiar with many of the names on their roster, but they are just steamrolling the South Division opponents in the ACAC this year.
And let's move over to U Sports. And on the women's side, the Dinos did a Saskatchewan road trip, and they were able to get a victory over the University of Regina, and they tied the University of Saskatchewan. So they're in second place in their division, and they were able to sneak back into the national top 10. They're now at number 10. And for Mount Royal, they played a couple matches. They played on Friday in UBC, and they lost that game out in Vancouver. Then they came back to Calgary on Sunday, and they beat UNBC 2-0.
Right. I was actually at that second game. The game against UNBC was at home. Honestly, very comfortable game for MRU, that one. Kind of an interesting weekend. They had to go from playing the top team in the Pacific Division, UBC, and did quite admirably to only lose 1-0. And then they turn around 2 days later and they play UNBC, who are the cellar dwellers in the division. The only team that MRU is actually above in the standings at the moment. But they looked pretty good overall. I mean, the Cougars' victory hardly seemed in doubt throughout most of the second half. Karina Kossum scored a good goal at the hour mark, and then MRU essentially held on for the 2-0 win. I also did have a brief post-game interview with her that we can run.
We'll run that interview right now, actually.
Overall thoughts on the performance? I mean, clean sheet, 3 points. You got to be happy with that.
Yeah, I think that we were passing the ball around really well. I think the defenders were doing their job. I think in the first half we needed a little bit more, and so that's why in the second half we kind of were able to pass the ball around, get into the box, and then just a finish in the net. Yeah.
And you guys, your other game this weekend was UBC on Friday, and that was a 1-0 win for the T-Birds.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go from playing the team at the top of the division to the team at the bottom.
Yeah.
What was it like to kind of make that kind of transition from, okay, we're playing the toughest team probably to a team that we should probably beat?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I think a team is a team. Both amazing teams. Doesn't matter where they stand. I think the most important thing is we play our game, and I think we did that today. Even against UBC, I think we did an amazing job. We just got a little bit unlucky with weather factors and stuff like that, but I think at the end of the day, a team is a team, and we did a great job. So yeah.
So you're in your last year.
Yeah.
How many more games on this pitch do you get?
One more. Yes. So next weekend will be my last game.
Okay. And is that Victoria you play?
UVic, yeah.
UVic.
Yes.
And do you have a makeup game against McEwen still?
Yes, we do on the Sunday.
Okay,
yes.
So two games next weekend.
Yeah, but we're driving up to Edmonton.
But are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about next weekend already?
It's obviously sad. I think I'm gonna miss the team. I'm gonna miss the girls. I think nothing beats the feeling of being on the pitch. But I just want to make the most of it. I'm excited to play the rest of the teams that are there, and I think we're going to do a great job. We've been doing good. So,
do you have to win out the rest of your games to make playoffs? Are you still in that hunt?
Yes, I think we do have to win all of our games, and it depends on the other teams as well. But the most important thing is we need to win the rest of them.
Is it more challenging to be in Pacific Division versus Prairies? Is that like a frustrating thing for you guys?
Again, at the end of the day, a team is a team. As long as we play our game, that's what matters. Pacific Division they have some very good challenging teams, but we just got to stay composed and stay disciplined.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, a win like today gives the team a big boost of confidence heading into the last couple games of the regular season. Overall, how is the team feeling?
I think wins like these, we love each other. We're having a great time on the field. It definitely boosts our confidence, and we got to restart now and do it again next weekend. So
sounds good. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, so it's looking right now with MRU that a lot of things would have to happen for them to make the playoffs. I guess it's still theoretically possible. It might be a bit of a stretch, but they are having a bit more of a little bit better run of form lately, I think, from what I've been getting from the results. Would you kind of agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, and Karina touched on that. They do need to basically win out the rest of their schedule, which will be very difficult for MRU. They have a tough match, a replay match up against McEwen, who's obviously had a strong season, right? They play Victoria next, so that I don't think will be a very easy game. But yeah, it is doable still, and until it's no longer mathematically possible, they just need to try and see how well they can do against these Pacific Division teams. I think it's pretty tough to be the outsider looking in as, a prairie-based team playing in the Pacific Division, which they have to do this year.
Mm-hmm. And for U Sports on the men's side, Mount Royal, they were able to get a couple wins. They beat Lethbridge, they beat Saskatchewan. Both those games were at home. They're at number 6 nationally, so they're still looking pretty good in their playoff hunt and looking like they're going to be a threat down the road. And Dinos, they also had a couple wins this weekend. They beat Lethbridge and they beat Saskatchewan. Those wins are a big boost, but it's a bit of a climb for them to maybe get back into the playoffs at this point.
Yeah, it's still a rebuild year for the Dinos, right? But I watched most of the Cougars match against Lethbridge on Sunday, and honestly, it was a little more even than I expected, at least what I saw. 1-0 win for MRU, but Lethbridge put up a pretty decent fight, especially for the first half an hour or so. But yeah, I mean, you can't deny with MRU, they've managed to come up with a formula to win games, and they're obviously having a great season.
For our feature interview this week, we have Adam Huskic. He is a Calgarian, and he has featured with various teams over the years, and including the Dinos. And But over the last year, he has been playing pro soccer, and he is currently in Finland playing for Pargas, I believe is the name of the team.
Yeah, Pargas EF was the team. But before that, he was playing in Bosnia, where he's actually from originally, I think in the second division.
It was second division, yes.
Yeah, second division in Bosnia, which is a good level. And yeah, he played, I think, 4 seasons with the Dinos. His time there was cut short a little bit by the COVID-19 pandemic, but he graduated from the program in 2021, I want to say.
Yeah,
but he was involved with the team in 2019, which was a very historic year for the Dinos. And based on his stats, I mean, it looked like he was playing. He was a starter for virtually his whole U Sports career, playing center back and doing a good job for them. And yeah, he talked to us about his career, mostly the places he's been since then, and he talked about playing with the Foothills U23 team. Talked about going over to Bosnia. He talked about Finland and what it's been like over there. And yeah, it's just a great opportunity to talk with him. And I actually really liked his answers. So this was a good interview.
Yeah, let's run that interview right now. I'd like to welcome Adam Huskic to the podcast. Adam is a Calgarian, and he is currently playing in Finland, and he is playing for Pargas. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a soccer player here? We know you were playing for U of C and you graduated. I think you played in 2021. You've turned professional and you've made it. This is your second stop. So talk about your path and how you got from the Dinos to here.
Well, yeah. So pretty much my time in university was coming down to an end. And obviously, as most players at that time, they either make a decision whether they want to continue with their career or, just focus on studies. I mean, I think with me, the education side of things was always just a backup. That was not really my main goal. I always wanted to have that just as an option, but my focus was always on the football. And so coming down to the end of the season, I had plans of, kind of thinking, okay, well, what's my next step? Where am I going to go? So after that season with Dinos, I said, I'm going to look into going into Europe because I think that's where my main goal of playing was. So I finished, and then I signed with the Foothills under 23s, which were pretty much like the Cavalry under 23s at the time, kind of like what they had for the League One setup this year, except for last year before that was around. And so, yeah, so I played there. I played under Jay Wheeldon there during the summer after my last year of uni. And it was good, it was able to get me prepared to leave. So I was getting ready to actually go on trial in Germany. So yeah, that was my plan, and then kind of things didn't turn out as I expected. As always in football, you never know what can happen, and things changed plans. But fortunately enough, Tommy from Calgary invited me to start training with the first team of Calgary, and so I was training with them almost until the end of their season in October. And then after that, it was pretty much deciding, okay, what's my next step? Am I going to continue with Calgary? Am I going to continue maybe somewhere else? And, I had a couple of options. And so obviously Tommy invited me into preseason again, coming into January. He's like, we want to see you. We're interested in you. We just want to see you now in preseason and some full matches. But around the same time, I got a couple of other offers. And I got an offer from Bosnia, where someone who knew me from the under 17 setup when I played for the under 17 national team there, he had a connection and a person that was looking for a center back. So I got an offer from there in Bosnia, and also had an offer from Finland actually as well. And so I weighed out kind of my options and what I thought was best. And that's when I went and signed in Bosnia for a club called BFK Simbao. And so, yeah, I signed there in the winter in January. I played a half season there. That was my first professional contract. So I got my first experience kind of on the pro scene there in Bosnia. I played there for 6 months, which afterwards my contract ended. I had an option to re-sign there, but I ended up, waiting it out a bit. I did so just obviously, as any footballer has, sometimes when they're out of contract, they do a few preseasons somewhere or they have trials. But I ended up getting this opportunity in August to sign here in Finland again, and I thought it was the best plan of action for me at the time, and that's what I ended up doing, and I signed here for Pargas.
So you've been playing in Finland. You have experience in Bosnia as well as at the university and U23 level in Canada. So What would you say are the major differences in the style of play or the style of coaching or the overall soccer culture that you've encountered throughout this journey of yours?
Well, I can say the main difference, especially like when you're comparing university type football to the senior kind of men's football. Obviously, with university football, it's a lot of young adults, 21, 19, 18-year-old. And it's still, although it's a good level, it's still an amateur level. I think you see although U Sports is good and it's always improving and they have great talent in U Sports. I think you see the real big jump is once you go pro, you see the big difference just in the level of the players, the overall speed of the game, the kind of decision making you have to make. It's just a much quicker game, and as a matter of fact, a much more physical game as well. So especially for example, when I first came to Bosnia, I had a bit of experience there, obviously as a youth national, but it's still different always when you compare it like youth football or amateur football to the senior game. And when you come there, it's a bit of some people, if you're not ready for it, it's a different level of physicality. The tempo of the play, it's much more. Well, I can say it's less forgiving. You're going at it, you're going at it, you're going at it. But I think the main difference as well is you see the change in how it's different in professionalism. Obviously, the kinds of things you do, how it's set up, it's a lot different. Like in U Sports, for example, they have you playing 2 games over the weekend. I don't know. I think that's something that's a little insane, especially if you tell that to any club in a professional setup that's happening, that you're playing a game on a Saturday, Sunday, back to back. It's a little crazy, and it's not doable in terms of injuries, in terms of quality of play. Usually you'll see on that second day, the quality of play will drop for sure because it's impossible for players to sustain 180 minutes in 2 days like that to keep going at such a high level.
But it sounds like the pathway of going to Europe was really appealing to you. So what was sort of the big driving force that made you want to go off to Europe as opposed to, say, trying something here?
Obviously, my goal always, as when I was a kid, was always say I wanted to play in Europe. Every young boy dreams of playing in one of those top 5 leagues, whether it be the Premier League, Serie A, like in Italy, in Germany, wherever it may be. And obviously, that was always a driving factor in the back of my head. And seeing people around me, I think that's one of the main things that wanted to keep me going. I don't think it was in the sense that maybe if I got a chance to sign earlier in the Canadian Premier League, or for example, or maybe in the States, something like that, maybe I would have. I think it just, who knows, it's just the way things come in football. Sometimes you don't get to choose what you want, and then you have to just take what's in front of you. Sometimes you got to weigh out your options and see what's best for you. And I think at that point in time, I think I had something guaranteed in front of me, and it was guaranteed. And I thought I could get matches under my belt there and gain some experience. So for me, it was just that idea that, okay, I can go to Europe, I can get my first professional contract, I can get matches under my belt, and I can really introduce myself at least to this European scene. And it's always different because I feel like Canadian Premier League is a great league. It's just improving. It's getting better and better, and it's really at a high level. I think it's a much higher level than I think most people give it credit for. I had time there. I experienced the players I was playing with have much more experience than me, a lot better CVs, a lot better careers. Who I had the opportunity to train with at Cavalry, and I think just with the way things are, with the things we're going, it wasn't said I wouldn't sign in the Canadian Premier League. I never closed doors to anything, but I think just at that given time, Europe was quite enticing to me, and the idea of getting to play in my homeland as well was a very nice, appealing thought to me. So that's kind of what drove my decision to going over there.
Going overseas always brings its own set of challenges, such as maybe culture shock, loneliness, language barriers. I know maybe with Bosnia that wasn't the case for you, but I think it may have been with Finland. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how it's shaped you as a player and as an individual?
Obviously, it's always different going abroad. Like you said, I think in Bosnia I didn't really have too many problems because that's my home, right? So I didn't find that issue there. But coming to Finland, obviously, it's a new culture, it's a new type of people. I think, luckily with Finland, everyone here really speaks English. I can't stress enough. It's actually quite interesting what they do. If you only have like a couple of guys on the team or a few guys on the team that speak English, they will accommodate for you, and they'll do run sessions in English and run as much of it as possible in English, which is surprising. Maybe like I had a bit of experience in training a bit in Germany, and that's definitely not the case there. You're expected to learn the language, and I think the main thing is once you're going to like a new setup like this, It's you have to be able to be willing to adapt. You can't be closed-minded. You can't think, oh, people just have to do it kind of my way. This no, you're not on the top of the line there now. Now it's time that you have to learn a new language. You have to adapt to this culture, and it's a question that I think a lot of people need to ask themselves before they go abroad or before they decide they want to maybe sign in one of these obscure countries, because the question is, how much do you love football? How much are you willing to take a risk to be able to push yourself to go to maybe take that next step to get a next level? It's not always easy. You're far away from home. You're far away from your parents, your friends, everything that was comfortable for you, and you're giving it up to start a new opportunity. So it's a question you got to ask yourself. And I think, well, it shaped me and it makes me a much stronger person. Like, thankfully, I think I have a good head on my shoulders. I thank God, my faith drives me and it keeps me centered. So, and, I maintain a good communication with my parents and my family back home and friends. So I'm able to stay calm under these kinds of situations, but I think it really shaped me to be a much stronger person overall, because, you go these long periods of time where obviously, you love what you're doing, you love playing football, but there's moments and times, obviously, when you're far away and you kind of don't know what's going on. So you just have to do your best to adapt with your situation, get to know the culture, get to know the people there, and then do your best to just kind of acclimatize to that.
Have there been any specific lessons or skills, aspects of the game that you've been working on while you've been over in Europe? Is there certain areas you've been trying to focus on?
Well, yeah. Well, the main thing I would say is, especially in Europe, is everyone here looks to play. Obviously, sometimes you're in a team or a system where it's different, where it's a lot more direct, more long ball. For example, I feel like in youth sports, it's a lot more direct. I think, obviously, again, like I said, it depends on what team you play on, the kind of style that coach wants to bring in or influence. But I feel like I'd say overall, the league as a whole is a lot more direct. And so coming here, obviously, they put a big focus on playing the ball, staying calm under pressure. And I think, although I think that's a strong part of my game, I think like there's always room to improve for everything. And so kind of when you come here, you got to focus really on remaining calm under pressure, quick decision making in terms, so it's not the ball just going everywhere. It's keeping the ball calm, keeping it under pressure, and trying to keep possession as much as possible given certain situations. Like I said, obviously it's different. Sometimes you get into a system or a style or a coach who wants to be, let's say, more direct with less possession-based football. But I think overall, from what I've seen in Bosnia and in Finland, is that teams like to play, and that's the kind of way modern football is going. Like, teams want to play, teams want to keep the ball, and it's kind of, although there's certain times and situations where you need to be direct, I think that art of maybe having an entire system that revolves around being direct is kind of maybe not dying, but it's getting much and much less in this current modern day of football.
Have you had any memorable moments or experiences either on the pitch or off the pitch that stand out from your time playing in Bosnia and Finland?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, like recently in Finland, I scored my first ever professional goal. I know, like I said, again, I was thankful to God for that, because, it's something you think of, although I'm a center back and that's not necessarily my go-to thing or what I'm known for. You always appreciate it, and it's always something you're going to remember. And so, yeah, I think that's something like, that I thought of as a kid, and I remember scoring it. I don't think it's something I'll forget. I think, as well as in Bosnia, kind of one of the craziest things was my first ever official match. We had a preseason when we had friendlies, but it's nothing like the actual game of the regular season. And I remember walking onto our pitch, and there's about 1,000. And there's about 1,000 away fans standing there. And obviously the culture of hooligans, and that is a little different in Europe, I would say, than in Canada, especially in Bosnia. It's kind of, these guys are hooligans, type of real like ultra elite groups. They're standing there right on their corner where they have, cut off by police surrounding all around them. And you walk on the pitch and you just hear them, and they're going at you. They're going at you all game. And then they have the pyrotechnics and it's just going crazy with their drums. And, it's something you don't forget. And they're swearing to me. They're telling me all kind of obscurities that I definitely can't mention on a podcast. Yeah, that's another thing I'll remember. It's just that first time stepping foot onto a pitch, like for my first ever professional match. I think it'll be tough to forget that moment and the feeling of what I felt in that moment in time. I think I was walking on the pitch and I was just thanking God, for being in that position, to being blessed to be able to do what I love, being paid to do what I love, and then, obviously with those kinds of atmospheres, you always find it easier to play, right? Because it's playing for something more than yourself at times as well. It's playing for people, for livelihood, other people. That's all they look for on the weekend is how you perform. So you definitely got to take it into account and respect. But yeah, those are I'd say the two biggest moments I remember. I'll take with me from kind of my first experiences abroad.
Absolutely, must have been really surreal and probably lots of butterflies too, I can imagine, for that first match.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely some nerves are part of the game that I felt like haven't really affected me too much in my career, thankfully. But it's definitely something a little sometimes before a match you're thinking, and you start to feel that little kind of that sensation in your stomach, and you're just kind of going, you're like, wow. And then it started. I think this time around it was a little different because I'm in the change room before the match, and I just hear it. I hear this. I haven't been in that experience yet where I'm hearing the fans. It's almost half an hour before the match. We haven't even gone out to warm up yet, and you just hear them, just the chanting starting, and it's crazy. It's almost like a buzz, like a vibration going around you. And yeah, it makes you think. It's a little different when you're going, let's say, somewhere. In youth sports, you don't always have the biggest crowds. You don't have that many people coming to watch you. So it's a little different. It's a little different when you start to have, bigger stadiums, more crowds coming to watch you, and where it's definitely a lot more on the line.
So Adam, the season is almost over in Finland. I think maybe only 1 or 2 games left. How's it gone so far for you and for the club?
Yeah, so with we have one game left actually next week. We had a game yesterday, which we won, thankfully. For myself personally, I can say, thankfully, I've done very well in my time here. I think I've raised a few eyebrows. I've definitely made a bit of a name for myself, even though it's been a short period of time. I was kind of signed in as emergency for the remaining part of the season for about 7 games. Obviously, this club was in not the best situation. They were in a relegation battle, and I was brought in to try to obviously do my best to kind of help them get out of that. Unfortunately, as is football, things don't always go as a plan. And last week we lost the match in which we got relegated. I think it's an interesting situation to be in. I haven't been in that situation before, and I knew obviously what I was coming into. And sometimes as a center back, it's hard to impose yourself into a team to make that kind of difference that you'd like to see. I think I brought a little more structure to the team, a little more security, but sometimes when you're missing goals or few foolish things are happening around, it's tough to have only a change in one player and to see a massive difference in what you're doing. I think I credit the team. They did their best. They tried, but too many times we gave up leads. I think in the last 3 games we gave up a lead to actually go and end up losing the match. So I think too many lost points in situations where the team needed to stay calm, I think, was what ended up in us being relegated. I think it's just also maybe a little inexperience. These guys are a very young team, a lot of guys that came in from the youth academy. And it's a whole load of things. You don't look for excuses. What happened. And like I said, football doesn't go always as planned, but the team gave their all. And, thankfully, beyond that, I was very pleased with how I played. I think, like I said, I made a bit of a name for myself. I did very well here. So although it was unfortunate the way things ended up, I still look at this point as a positive in my career. And, I don't necessarily look at it negatively.
My last one for you is about basically what comes next for you and your future goals and aspirations. And if you have plans to look for more opportunities in Europe, or if you see a move home at some point back to Canada, like you said earlier, you don't want to close any doors. Just kind of curious what's coming next for you.
Like I say, what you were going off what you're saying, I don't close any doors. I would be open to going back to Canada. You never close that door. I think, like I said, I made a bit of a name for myself here as well. So I think staying kind of in this Scandinavian market is kind of maybe my goal for the next, I think maybe few years of my career. But we'll see. The doors are never closed, and my goals are obviously to attain I want to play in a top 5 league before the time that I'm 30, and I have big aspirations to play for Bosnia for my national team as well. It's never too far away. You're only in football. Football is a funny world. At one moment you think you're feeling down, you're feeling low, and then the next step you're signed somewhere amazing and you're playing for the national team, right? And I think whether that's taking a route through the CPL or staying in Europe, I think it's possible. So that's just kind of where my goals lie at this moment in time.
So last question, Adam. what do you miss most about Calgary? Like, is there anything in particular, family and friends is always sort of an easy answer, but is there anything really Calgary specific that you kind of are longing for and missing?
I don't know. It's a tough one, like it's tough to not say. Like my family and friends, I think I have to lead off with that because obviously, it's being far from them, and I'm very close to my family. I'm very close to my friends. I talk to my parents. I don't think everyone's kind of like me, but I make sure of it. I talk to my mom and dad pretty much every single day. I make sure to maintain a close relationship. We almost talk for an hour every day just to catch up and see what's happening day to day. So I think it's tough to say. I love Calgary. I love the city. I think it's a great city. It's a buzzing city. There's always something interesting, but it's tough for me to say anything besides my parents. Mostly it's that's what I miss most, going home no matter what, seeing them every day. I think that's it's kind of, I mean, for loss of words thinking about them because it's tough. I miss them the most, I would say.
Thanks very much for taking the time, Adam, and we appreciate it, and we wish you we wish you all the best in your final match of the season and your career going forward. We'll make sure to be following along with interest.
Hey, no, thank you very much for having me, guys. I really appreciate your time and having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Adam. We really appreciate all your answers to our questions.
Thanks again to Adam for taking the time, working out all the time differences, the 9-hour time difference, and doing the interview with us this week. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll be watching his career with interest and see where he goes next, because it sounds like his time at Pargas is pretty close to being up. So I think we'll be probably getting some news about his next destination soon enough.
Yeah, and like he kind of said, he was doing really well for Pargas, so he's probably hoping to use that opportunity as a springboard to maybe move to a higher level of competition. I did think it was interesting that he doesn't want to rule out the possibility of one day returning home. He definitely seems like a player who would potentially excel in the CPL, so I'm curious to see if he eventually lands back here at some point. Seems like the Cavalry coaches are well aware of him. He did train with Cavalry for a while, so I wonder if he'll be on their radar in the years to come.
After we did this interview, Scott, I was thinking about this and I thought, what's it really like to go from, say, a lower division in Finland? Like, can you advance from there and how quickly? And anyway, I sort of racked my brain a little bit about this and a name which I'm guessing that you may not remember, but I eventually figured it out. It took me a little bit of time. There's a guy from Edmonton named Randy Edwini Bonsi. And I remember this guy because he would now, like, I think he played for FC Edmonton, like right when they kind of started. He's probably like in his 30s now, but he was a guy who was with, I think, Whitecaps, like the Whitecaps 2 team or whatever it was. And then when his contract ran out, he played in the second division in Finland. And over the course of a year in the second division of Finland, he went from there to Bundesliga 2. So that was his ascendance. Now, I think one of the advantages he had going for him is he was a goal scorer. And I checked his stats. In 20 matches in the Finnish second division, he scored 16 goals. So that's kind of eye-popping numbers. But yeah, he went directly from Finland Division 2 to Division 2 in Germany. So definitely, even at these lower levels in Scandinavia, there are scouts, there are people watching. So there's definitely a path.
Absolutely. That's quite the story because, yeah, the second division in Germany is nothing to sneeze at, honestly. Like, if you look at the league now, some of the clubs that are in that division, I know Edwin Bonsu was, I don't know when he was in the second league in Germany, but right now, I mean, that division has Hamburg, it has Schalke, it has Hertha Berlin, it has Nuremberg, like really big German clubs that have found themselves relegated from the top flight. So cool. I didn't know that about Edwin Bonsu, which is a name that rings a bell, but I honestly wouldn't probably recognize him on the street if I ran into him.
Yeah, and I think I sort of was muddling around in my head for like the whole afternoon, and I was like, it's a guy from Edmonton, and then I eventually started Googling around and I figured out who it was. But
yeah, I just pulled up his Wikipedia actually, and so the Finnish club he was with, I may mispronounce this, but it was AC Oulu, and then he went to Eintracht Braunschweig in Germany, and then registered 16 league games for them, and then moved down to their reserve teams and went to Stuttgarter Kickers, VfR Aalen. Yeah, good. Managed to carve out a career in Germany for a good 6 or 7 years there before returning to play with FC Edmonton in 2019. That must be why I recognize his surname, is the first CPL season.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's wrap it up with a couple quick mentions, a couple odds and ends here that I wanted to go over. The first one is in August. We didn't talk about this, but the provincial championships happened, and on the U17 women's side, Calgary West was able to pull out the provincial championship and are actually currently at Nationals in Moncton. And Nationals started a couple days ago, and so far, so good for them. Their first 2 matches, they defeated the Manitoba rep from Winnipeg 1-0 and the Ontario reps from Kitchener, and they beat them 2-0. So good start for them so far. I think they have a couple more games left in their round robin, and then they go off into the knockout stage. So yeah, all the best to that club. I hope they're doing well, but that's got to be a pretty cool experience for them under 17 group playing in Nationals.
Yeah, 100%. I actually I competed at Nationals with my U18 club back in 2012, my Chinook team, and honestly, it's still like technically is the highlight of my soccer career because I never really excelled after that at the university level. But it's quite the opportunity. I remember there was an opening ceremony, and the one I went to was in a very similar location in Nova Scotia in Sydney. And that was, I remember there was an opening ceremony, and we were there for over a week, and it just felt very professional and big time.
Anyway, that's a cool story. And the last thing to mention really here is the men's national team roster for their friendly against Japan was announced today, and Sam Adekugbe is on the roster. He's the only Calgary rep. So we'll see what happens in that match. But just thought that would be another thing to sort of make sure we've covered checked every possible box and every possible topic this week. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast by using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com. And there's more info there about how to subscribe or how to leave a question or comment. And you can also follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.